The silence in Kennel Bonhigh was more deafening than the roar of a jet engine. In the corner of the dim concrete room sat Smoky, a balmy kilogram German Shepherd Labrador mix, his black and tan fur matted with the dust of a mission that had gone horribly wrong. His ears, usually erect and alert, were pinned back slightly, and his intelligent dark brown eyes were fixed on the heavy steel door. For 3 days the finest handlers in the seal community had tried to coax him with his favourite treats, but the food sat untouched, gathering flies. Smoky wasn't just grieving, he was waiting. To the outside world, Smoky was a broken tool of war, a K9 who had lost his soul when his handler was taken in a tragic ambush. But those who looked closer saw the tension in his powerful muzzle, and the way he guarded a small, ragged piece of tactical nylon tucked under his paws. He wasn't just a dog in mourning, he was a witness to a crime that reached the highest levels of the command. The secret Smoky held was the only thing that could avenge his fallen partner, but he needed someone he could trust to decode the message. All stories presented on this channel are fictional and are creatively developed based on themes such as courage, loyalty, resilience, and the special bond between veterans and their dogs. The heavy boots of William Wynne echoed through the corridor, a rhythmic thud that commanded respect. At number years old, William was a mountain of a man, tall, with broad shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of decades in the field. His salt and pepper hair was kept in a strict military buzz cut, and his square-jawed face bore the deep forehead wrinkles of a man who had seen too much. As he approached the kennel, his deep moss-green eyes scanned the room with a hunter-esque precision. He adjusted his short boxed beard, the silver streaks glinting in the fluorescent light. William wasn't supposed to be here. He was semi-retired, a legend in K9 training, but the reports of a non-responsive asset had reached his desk, and he knew Smoky deserved better than a cage. Before we dive into the mystery William is about to uncover, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button so you don't miss any part of this incredible journey of loyalty and justice. William stood outside the bars, his muscular frame casting a long shadow. He didn't speak, he didn't offer a treat. He simply sat down on the cold floor, leaning his back against the wall and waited. He knew Smokius lineage, the strength of a shepherd mixed with the intuition of a Labrador. He watched the dog's erect, pointed ears twitch at the sound of a distant siren. Smoky didn't growl. He simply stared at William with a piercing intensity. William's rugged, sun-kissed skin crinkled as he offered a small, respectful nod. "Mort can no ove cape what they re-saying about you, Smoky," William whispered, his voice a low rumble. "They think you've given up. But Mort see the way you re-holding that scrap of nylon, you re-not finished, are you?" For the first time in Bamey High hours, Smoky S-tail gave a single weak thump against the floor. The bond was forged not in words but in the recognition of shared scars. William realized that Smoky wasn't refusing to eat because he wanted to die. He was refusing to move because he was protecting the last piece of evidence from the ambush site. The official report was simple, a routine patrol, an unexpected IED and a tragic loss. But as William looked at Smoky, he saw a tactical genius, not a victim. He remembered the rumours circulating through the veteran community, whispers of a black cell within the high-ranking logistics officers who were selling coordinates to the highest bidder. William reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of dried venison, placing it just inside the bars. Smoky looked at the food, then back at William's moss-green eyes. The dog stood up, his posture perfectly upright despite his exhaustion. He moved toward the food, but instead of eating it, he dropped the nylon scrap he had been guarding. It wasn't just a piece of a vest, it was a charred GPS unit, modified with a standard encryption chip. William S. Hart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't standard issue SEAL gear. This was a tracking device meant to lead the enemy straight to the unit. Smoky had been ambushed. He and his handler had been served up on a silver platter. William carefully reached through the bars and picked up the device. Smoky watched him with a look that seemed almost human in its relief. The dog finally lowered his head and began to eat, the hunger strike broken only once the mission had been passed to a capable. As Smoky ate, William examined the GPS unit under a small tactical flashlight. The serial number was partially melted, manufacturing mark was clear. It belonged to a private defense contractor linked to General Vance, a man William had served under 10 years ago. The realization hit William like a physical blow. The ambush was a sanctioned hit to cover up a massive embezzlement scheme. Smoky had seen the person who planted the device, and that person was likely still on the base. William looked at the dog, who was now standing alert, his long muzzle sniffing the air. "They think we re just an old man and a broken dog," William muttered, his jawline tightening ve capite hat resolve. "They have no idea what is coming for them." William Wynne knew that the longer Smoky stayed in that kennel, the easier it would be for them to make him disappear. Under the cover of a routine transfer order, forged with the precision only a 30-year veteran could manage, William led Smoky out of the facility. The Bamikilogam K9 walked with a newfound purpose, his perfectly upright posture and alert, pointed ears making him look like the elite soldier he was. They retreated to William's private workshop, a space filled with the scent of motor oil and old maps. William sat at his desk, the deep echoing his intense focus as he connected the Jeep unit to his laptop. His moss-green eyes, framed by deep crow's feet, squinted at the scrolling code. "This is just a tracker, Smoky," William whispered, his powerful jaw tightening. "It's a two-way transmitter. It didn't just tell them where the unit was. It sent a signal to trigger the ambush." Smoky let out a low, mournful whine, resting his long muzzle on William's knee. They weren't just looking for a traitor. They were looking for the person who had held the remote control to a hero. The digital trail led to a shell company based out of Panama, but the encrypted login used to activate the device originated from within the base's own secure network. William stood up, his muscular build casting a shadow against the workshop walls. He adjusted his short, silver-streaked boxed beard and took a deep breath. He needed to get back onto the base, but not as a visitor. He needed to look like the legend he used to be. Dressing in his old tactical gear, William looked every bit the elite operative, square-jawed and formidable. He checked Smoky, whose black and tan fur shone under the workshop lights. The plan was simple: infiltrate the logistics archive and find the physical requisition form for that specific GPS unit. If William could find a signature, he could find the killer. But as they approached the secondary gate, Smoky's ears suddenly flattened. He didn't growl, but his body went rigid. He smelled something or someone that took him back to the night of the fire and the betrayal. Navigating the base after hours required more than just a badge. It required the instinct of a hunter. William moved through the shadows of the motor pool, his rugged, sun-kissed skin blending into the darkness. Smoky moved like a ghost beside him, his intelligent dark brown eyes scanning every corner. They reached the records wing, a cold, sterile building that housed the secrets of 1,000 missions. William used a bypassed keycard to enter the archive. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of paper and ozone. As William flipped through the physical files, his deep moss-green eyes caught a familiar name on a redacted supply manifest: Project Cerberus. It was a logistics operation overseen by General Vance. The pieces were falling into payload Zerhat equipment being lost in combat only to be sold on the black market. The ambush hadn't been a mistake. It was a way to clean the books by eliminating the soldiers who had started asking questions about the missing gear. Just as William tucked the manifest into his jacket, the heavy double doors at the end of the hall creaked open. Smoky immediately shifted into a defensive stance, his posture perfectly upright and his muzzle pointed directly at the intruder. A man in a tailored officer-s uniform stepped into the light, Colonel Miller, Vance's right-hand man. Miller looked at William, then at the dog, a cold smirk playing on his lips. "You always were too curious for your own good, Wynne," Miller said, his voice echoing in the empty hall. Smoky let out a sound that was to bark, but a deep vibrating warning from his chest. He recognized Miller's scent from the night of the ambush. William stood his ground, his broad shoulders squared and his square jaw set in stone. The truth was out, but getting out of the building alive was a different matter. Miller didn't reach for a weapon. He did not have to. He knew that any noise would bring the base security swarming. Instead, he signaled to 2 MPs waiting in the shadows. William didn't hesitate. He knew he couldn't fight his way out without risking Smoky, and he refused to let this loyal K9 see another ambush. With a sharp whistle, William signaled Smoky to follow. They didn't run, they moved with tactical efficiency, looping through the heavy shelving units of the archive. William used his knowledge of the building's old ventilation system, a relic of the original construction he'd memorized years ago. He boosted the Bamikilogam Smoky into a low-hanging duct before pulling himself up with the strength of a man half his age. From the safety of the shadows above, William watched Miller's frustrated search below. His moss-green eyes burned with a silent promise. They had the evidence, and now they were going to turn the hunters into the hunted. The ventilation shaft was cramped, smelling of dust and cold steel, but for William Wynne it was a familiar sanctuary. He crawled with a methodical grace, his broad shoulders barely clearing the metal side. Behind him, Smoky moved with surprising silence for a Bamaki Gam dog, his claws retracted to avoid making a sound on the tin. William S. moss-green eyes scanned through the slats of each vent they passed. Below he could hear the frantic footsteps of Colonel Miller-S' team. They rechecking the exits, William breathed, the deep wrinkles on his forehead intensifying in the dim light. He reached a junction that led toward the old boiler room, a part of the base that had been decommissioned years ago. With a final controlled drop, William landed on the concrete floor, catching Smoky mid-air to ensure a silent landing. They were out of the immediate dragnet, but they were now ghosts on their own base. William adjusted his salt and pepper Bayou Det cut and looked at the GPS unit. The clock was ticking, and the traitors were already moving to erase their trail. 2 hours later, William S.'s rugged, sun-kissed skin was illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern inside a hidden cabin on the edge of the training grounds. This was his off-the-grid spot, filled with old 3D architectural models and topographical maps. Smoky sat by the door, his posture perfectly upright, his erect pointed ears twitching at the sound of every falling leaf. William sat up mort for wooden table, his square jaw set as he finally cracked the encryption on the GPS unit. It wasn't just coordinates, it was a digital kill switch. The unit had been programmed to emit a high-frequency pulse that interfered with K9 communication headsets, causing the dogs to become disoriented and aggressive toward their own handlers. "This is how they did it, Smoky," William whispered, his moss-green eyes narrowing. "They didn't just ambush the team, they turned the dogs against the men to create a distraction." Smoky let out a soft, intelligent huff, his dark brown eyes reflecting the lantern light as if he understood the gravity of the betrayal. As William dug deeper into the files, he found a hidden folder labeled Project Echo. It contained the secret of Smoky's elite unit, a specialized training protocol that allowed the dogs to communicate through subtle haptic vibrations in their collars, bypassing verbal or hand signals entirely. This was why Smoky had refused to eat. He was waiting for a heartbeat signal from his fallen handler, a signal that only a specific frequency could trigger. William realized that Smoky wasn't just guarding evidence. He was waiting for the Unit's secret code to be entered so he could unlock a secondary memory drive hidden within his own tactical collar. With trembling fingers, William entered the bypass code. A small compartment in Smoky's cocker clicked open, revealing a micro SD card. The late handler had known he wouldn't make it out and had used the dog as a living hard drive to store the recorded audio of General Vance discussing the weapon sales. Smoky's loyalty wasn't just emotional, it was the final stage of a mission he was determined to complete. The audio on the micro SD card was chilling. It wasn't just about money, it was about power. General Vance was heard discussing a meeting at a private estate, a massive neoclassical manor located just 30 miles north. William studied the blueprints of the estate, his interest in architectural design allowing him to spot a flaw in the security layout. The manor, with its grand columns and sprawling shaded edges, had a service entrance through a refurbished neoclassical garden. "They think their wealth hides them," William muttered, his powerful jawline tightening. "But every structure has a weak point." He looked at Smoky, whose tan and black fur seemed to blend into the shadows of the cabin. To get into that manor and expose the general, they would need guns. They needed the graphic shading of the night and Smoky's ability to move undetected. They were no longer just a veteran and a dog, they were a precision strike team. William spent the next hour preparing. He didn't reach for a rifle. Instead, he packed a high-resolution camera, a signal jammer, and a customized silent whistle that would trigger Smoky's haptic collar. His plan was to infiltrate the General Escala, capture the exchange of the illegal weapon blueprints on film, and broadcast it directly to the military internal affairs server. He looked at Motf himself in the small cabin mirror, the silver streaks in his short-boxed beard, the crow's feet around his moss-green eyes. He looked like a man who had retired, but his heart beat with the fire of a Navy SEAL. "Ready, Smoky?" The dog stood, his long muzzle lifting as he let out a sharp, confident breath. He was no longer the starving, broken K9 from Kennel High. He was the key to taking down a crooked empire. As they stepped out into the cool night air, the mission was clear. No blood, no shots fired, just pure, cold justice. The neoclassical manor sat atop the hill like a silent fortress of marble and glass. Its grand white columns stood tall against the midnight sky, creating deep, shaded edges that William Wynne used to his advantage. From a distance, William looked through his binoculars, his moss-green eyes narrowing as he analysed the building's layout. He admired the clean, sharp lines of the architecture, a shaded verkepite at edges aesthetic that felt both timeless and imposing, but he was there for a tour. "See those columns, Smoky?" William whispered, his silver-streaked box beard brushing against his tactical collar. "Those are our cover." Smoky sat beside him, his Bamaki low-gam frame perfectly still. The dog's black and tan fur blended into the darkness of the surrounding woods. Smoky's erect, pointed ears were rotated forward, catching the distant sound of security patrols. They weren't looking for a man and a dog, they were looking for a high-tech intrusion. They had no idea that the most dangerous weapon on the grounds was currently sitting in the grass, waiting for a silent signal. William tapped a command into his modified wrist-mounted tablet. Instantly, Smoky felt a gentle rhythmic vibration against his neck, the unit secret haptic code. It was the signal for reconnaissance, stealth mode. Without a single bark or command, the German Shepherd Labrador mix vanished into the shadows. Smoky moved verkepite at a low, predatory crouch, his long muzzle close to the ground. He bypassed the infrared sensors by sticking to the stone paths that retained the day's heat, masking his biological signature. William watched the feed from the miniature camera on Smoky's harness. His muscular frame moved verkepite at practiced ease as he followed the dog's lead, staying in the blind spots of the rotating cameras. Every time Smoky felt a pulse on his left side, he turned. A pulse on the right, he stopped. This was the peak of Kachin human synchronization, a language built on years of trust and the secret technology Smoky original handler had died to protect. Inside the manor's grand ballroom, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and cold ambition. General Vance stood at the center of a circle of international buyers, his medals glinting under the crystal chandeliers. William and Smoky reached the mezzanine, looking down from behind a heavy velvet curtain. William's rugged, sun-kissed skin was tight with suppressed anger as he watched Vance slide a briefcase across a neoclassical mahogany table. There were no guns in sight, only pens and digital tablets, the modern tools of war and betrayal. The coordinates are locked, Vance's voice drifted up, cold and devoid of remorse. The next shipment will be lost just like the last one. Smoky let out a breath so soft it did even stir the curtain, his dark brown eyes locked onto the man who had ordered the ambush. William reached for his camera, the deep crow's feet around his eyes deepening as he focused the lens on the documents laid out on the table. As the camera shutter clicked silently, William captured high-resolution images of the weapon manifests. These weren't just standard rifles. They were blueprints for the same tracking devices that had led Smoky's unit to their deaths. Suddenly, Smoky's ears flattened and he gave a sharp, silent nudge to William's leg. A security guard was approaching the mezzanine doors. William didn't panic. He tucked the camera into his vest and signaled Smoky to the floor. The dog's Bammy kilogram weight was pressed flat against the carpet, his black and tan fur mimicking the shadows of the furniture. The guard walked past, the beam of his flashlight missing them by mere inches. William's square jaw was set firm, his deep forehead wrinkles glistening with a thin sheen of sweat. They had the proof they needed, but the general was already preparing to leave. If they didn't act now, the digital evidence would be encrypted and sent to a server halfway across the world, making it impossible to trace. General Vance began to head toward a private study, the briefcase firmly in hand. William knew this was their only chance. He sent a complex vibration to Smoky's collar. Distraction, non-lethal. Smoky understood immediately. He didn't growl or attack. Instead, he slipped into the ventilation duct he had scouted earlier. Seconds later, a heavy neoclassical vase in the hallway accidentally tipped over, crashing onto the marble floor. The sound echoed through the manor, drawing the guards away from the General's. In the confusion, William stepped out from the shadows, his tall, muscular build blocking Vance's path to the study. The general froze, his eyes widening as he recognized the man he thought had retired to a quiet life of 3D modeling and dogs. Wynne? Vance hissed, his hand reaching for a panic button. William's moss-green eyes burned with a righteous fire. "The mission is over, General," William said, his voice a low, dangerous growl, "and Smoky has a message for you." The air in the hallway was thick with the smell of old paper and the general's expensive cologne. William Wynne stood motionless, his broad shoulders blocking the only exit to the study. His moss-green eyes were fixed on General Vance, reflecting a cold, unwavering light. "You re a long way from your workshop, William," Vance sneered, though his hand trembled as he gripped his briefcase. You think a retired builder and a stray dog can take down a decorated officer? William didn't flinch. His square-jawed face, etched with the deep lines of a man who had seen the true cost of betrayal, remained a mask of stone. Behind him, Smoky stepped out from the shadows. The Bamie-kilogram Shepherd-Labrador mix didn't growl. He simply stood in a perfectly upright posture, his erect pointed ears locked onto the general. Smoky's intelligent dark brown eyes held a weight that no human could ignore, the weight of a partner lost and a mission unfinished. There were no weapons drawn, yet the power in the room had shifted entirely to the veteran and his K9. Vance's eyes flickered toward the panic button on the wall. "Mort have 20 security contractors on this floor, Wynne. You won't make it to the front gate." William leaned forward slightly, the silver streaks in his boxed beard glinting. "They were already busy, General. Your security system is currently chasing a ghost in the ventilation ducts." William pulled out the GPS unit, its charred surface a silent accusation. "This device sent the signal that killed your men. And Smoky here? He's the one who kept the logs." Vance's face went pale. He knew that if that data went public, his empire of neoclassical manners and illegal blueprints would crumble. He reached for the heavy mahogany door to trigger a lockdown, but William was faster. With a subtle flick of his wrist, William activated Smoky's haptic collar. The dog surged forward not to bite but to wedge his powerful muzzle into the doorframe, preventing it from latching. The Unit's secret, the perfect synchronization of man and dog, was proving to be Vance's undoing. Vance turned and fled through a side door leading into the manor's private gallery. William and Smoky followed, their movements coordinated like a single shadow. The gallery was a masterpiece of neoclassical design, with high-vaulted ceilings and deep-shaded edges created by marble statues. William's knowledge of 3D modeling allowed him to predict Vance's path before the general even took a step. "He's heading for the server room in the basement," William whispered. He signaled Smoky with a silent vibration. "Intercept." Smoky vanished behind a row of Greek columns, his black and tan fur acting as the perfect camouflage against the dark wood paneling. William moved through the center of the room, his muscular build and powerful jawline giving him the appearance of an ancient warrior brought to life. He wasn't just chasing a traitor, he was dismantling a corrupt structure piece by piece, using the very architecture Vance used to hide his secrets. By the time Vance reached the heavy steel door of the server room, Smoky was already there, sitting patiently in front of the biometric scanner. The general stopped dead in his tracks, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked at the dog, whose dark brown eyes seemed to judge his every sin. William caught up, his rugged sun-kissed skin barely showing a bead of sweat. "It's over, Vance. The micro SD card Smoky was carrying, it's already uploading to internal affairs. The moment we stepped onto this property, the signal was broadcasted." William held up his tablet showing the progress bar, "Chimtam% complete." The secret of Smoky's unit was just the haptic code. It was their ability to act as a mobile uplink. Smoky's collar had been pinging the manor's Wi-Fi since they arrived, bypassing every firewall the general had installed. The silence of the room was broken only by the hum of the servers, a digital funeral march for a career built on blood and greed. The distant sound of sirens began to echo through the neoclassical halls. Vance slumped against the wall, the briefcase sliding from his hand. He looked at William, his moss-green eyes, and the dog that had refused to give up. "Why?" Vance whispered. "You could have stayed retired." William adjusted his military buzz cut and looked down at Smoky, who was now standing by his side, his posture as proud and upright as ever. "Because loyalty is to retirement plan, General. It's a vow." As the doors to the gallery burst open, not with gunfire but with the authority of the military police, William didn't stay to watch the handcuffs click. He didn't need to. He led Smoky out through the neoclassical garden, the morning sun beginning to touch the shaded edges of the manor. Smoky's ears were forward, his tail gave a confident wag, and for the first time in weeks his intelligent eyes looked toward the future. They had exposed the treason, honored the fallen, and proven that the bond between a SEAL and his K9 is a force that no ambush can ever truly break. As the flashing blue and red lights of the military police faded into the distance, a heavy silence returned to the neoclassical manor. William Wynne stood on the gravel driveway, his tall, muscular frame silhouetted against the grand marble pillar. He ran a hand over his salt and pepper military buzz cut, feeling the cool night air on his rugged, sun-kissed skin. Beside him, Smoky remained in a perfectly upright posture, his Bamie-kilogram frame steady as a statue. The German Shepherd-Labrador mix didn't look back at the manor. His intelligent dark brown eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the first hint of dawn was beginning to break. "It's done, Smoky," William said softly, his voice thick with the weight of the night's events. The evidence had been delivered, the traitors were in custody, and the black cell was being dismantled piece by piece. But for William, the mission wasn't just about the arrest. It was about the soul of the dog who had risked everything to keep a secret. Back at William S. workshop, the atmosphere had shifted from tension to a quiet, solemn respect. William sat at his desk, his moss-green eyes scanning the final files recovered from Smoky's micro SD card. Among the encrypted blueprints and audio logs, he found a single video file that hadn't been part of the evidence. He clicked play. It was Smoky's original handler, recorded just days before the ambush. "If you're re-seeing this, it means the unit's secret worked," the young SEAL said into the camera, a tired but proud smile on his face. This technology wasn't just for missions. It was to ensure that if one of us didn't make it, the other would never be alone. William looked over at Smoky, who had his long muzzle resting on his paws. The secret was just a haptic code or a hidden drive. It was a heartbeat bridge designed to help a K9 find a new partner whose pulse matched the rhythm of the one they lost. The news of the scandal broke across the veteran community like a thunderclap. General Vance and his associates were facing life sentences for treason, and the Project Echo technology was finally being used for its intended purpose, helping wounded warriors and their K9s communicate better than ever before. William Wynne, once a man who preferred the solitude of his 3D models and architectural renders, found himself at the center of a new movement. His square-jawed face appeared on monitors across the base, not as a suspect but as a hero. Yet William didn't care for the fame. He spent his days in the workshop, his deep forehead wrinkles softening as he watched Smoky play in the yard. The dog had regained his full weight, his black and tan fur glowing with health. Smoky erect, pointed ears were always alert, but the sadness that had once clouded his dark brown eyes had been replaced by a quiet, steady peace. A month after the raid, a private ceremony was held at the Unit S headquarters to honor the fallen. William stood in the back, his broad shoulders squared, wearing his old dress blues that still fit his muscular build perfectly. Smoky stood by his side, his posture impeccably upright, wearing a formal tactical harness. When the name of Smoky's first handler was called, the dog didn't whine or bark. Instead, he felt a specific vibration on his collar, the final salute code that William had programmed. Smoky lifted his head, his long muzzle pointing toward the sky in a silent, dignified tribute. William felt a lump in his throat as he looked down at the dog. The crow's feet around his moss-green eyes crinkled as he placed a hand on Smoky's head. They had faced the darkness of an ambush and the complexity of a neoclassical conspiracy, but they had come out the other side as a family. The sun set over the workshop, casting long graphic shadows across the architectural models on William S. table. He was currently working on a new design, a sanctuary for retired K9s and veterans to heal together. Smoky sat at the door, his silhouette framed by the orange glow of the evening. He looked back at William, his intelligent eyes reflecting a bond that went beyond training and technology. "We've got more work to do, Smoky," William said, a small, rare smile touching his powerful jaw. The black cell might have been defeated, but there were always more stories to tell, more secrets to uncover, and more heroes, both human and K9, who needed a voice. As the stars began to appear, the veteran and the K9 walked out into the cool night, ready for what a mission the world had for them next. The hunger was gone, the ambush was avenged, and the secret was safe.
The Channel, the Dog, and the Veteran is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. All stories presented on this channel are fictional and are creatively developed based on themes such as courage, loyalty, resilience, and the special bond between veterans and their dogs. The content does not represent real individuals, actual events, or documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals, or events is purely coincidental.